All right, A-pushers. I'm waiting for my computer to respond. Having a couple tech issues, and it's not because I'm a boomer. It's because I got a clunky old computer. So I'm waiting for this. There we go. From the current slide. Here we go. All right, sweet. So before we get into this, I just kind of want to go over just a couple things that we're going to look forward to the next few days. All right, this is on the note sheet, though. This first slide, War in the Pacific. Japan had conquered much of Southeast Asia. All right, we'll get back in the PowerPoint in a second. But look at this. Day 4 task. This would be Wednesday, right? March 24th. Take notes on the War in the Pacific. This is the lecture for War in the Pacific. Then number 2, watch the century. Civilians at war. Disclaimer. This is an intense film. It's an hour and 7 minutes long. If you don't have the stomach for it, turn it off. But I hope you can watch it. This really gets into some of the atrocities the Japanese committed prior to getting involved with the U.S., what they did in Japan and China and other parts of Asia. All right. The last thing I want you to do, participate in the class online discussion. For those of you who have been doing it, awesome job. For those of you that were missing, please step up. If you know people that aren't participating, please send them send the link to them of this little video lecture. I don't care. Let them know that I'd like them all to participate. Hey, we're going forward, and the College Board, they're going to put some dates out there in like a week or so. And they're going to tell us, hey, when are these exams going to be taking place? It's going to be modified a bit, but they're going to make it take place, and this content we're going over will be in there. So this is Wednesday's task. Now let's go to Friday. Friday, all right? Watch clips from film Victory in the Pacific. There's a couple clips, and they actually talked to some of the pilots who actually flew over Japan and did some of these bombing raids. This is not even the atomic weapon. I'm talking about the fire bombing of all of these Japanese cities that took place. When I first learned about this, I was just astonished that the bombing took place for so long prior to the use of the atomic weapon. When you're done watching some of these clips, take some notes too, because you're going to have to make an argument this week saying, hey, was the U.S. justified in using the atomic weapon? That gets us to part 2. Release primary sources for the activity decision to drop the bomb. You all got this handy dandy packet here. If you don't have a physical one, you have the digital one posted online. Sweet. All right, here's for freedom speech. Hopefully you did this last time on Monday. Now we're flipping the pages. All right, and a couple pages in, decision to drop the bomb. I'm going to release those documents on Wednesday, probably, so some of you can get ahead. Then, once you've gone through all those documents, you watched a little bit of Victory in the Pacific, you need to write a response to the following question. Was the U.S. justified in using the atomic weapon to end the war? All right. That's a tough one. I still struggle with it. I'm all over the place with this, depending on the evidence and information you're looking at. And it's tough for us in 2020 to sit back and sit up on high and judge. But I think there's a lot of evidence out there to look at this and look at how they came to that conclusion. All right. Then there's going to be a Google form. And I want you just to put in some of your information. I'll have a pie chart, and I'll update this with a brief video on where's the class at. Were we justified? Were we not justified? All right, interesting question. All right, now let's get into next week. Next week, this is what we're looking at. And I see some of this is cut off. So let's see. Oh, I just lost my picture in there. That's fine. I bet some of you don't mind. You don't see me anymore. All right, maybe you do. I don't know. Here's my little Green Bay Packers mug. Next week, we're going to do an MC test online, Tuesday, March 31st. It's going to cover Unit 7, 1898 to 1945. This will be timed. This is like all the other timed ones. You should have about 45 minutes. And then we'll go forward from there, seeing what is available to us. But that will be next week. We'll probably take a week break for spring break. I don't know. We'll see. I'm waiting for cues and directives from the district and College Board and all that. If you have questions, email me. I'm very available. Also, you can chat me up, too. Now, let's get back to what we are doing today. Now, this is the Japanese Empire. All right, you can see the Japanese Empire here, the extent of it. If you look at, here's my little cursor, I'm going to drag it around. Yes, this is what they controlled by August of 42. They had a massive empire. Some of you probably remember I've talked this. Spent a couple years in Thailand. There's all kinds of memorials and monuments there. I wasn't too aware of that until I actually got on the ground there. All right, but let's get into this little mini lecture here and go over a couple things. Moving back to the notes section of your document here, you've got the Battle of Midway. Japanese next thrust was towards Midway Island. This is after Pearl Harbor, several months after Pearl Harbor. It's strategic, northwest of Hawaii, and the American Navy moves there to defend it. This is seen as a huge critical battle in the war. They were hoping that if the Japanese were hoping that the U.S., if they can't do it here, that maybe they would just capitulate and not put forth much more effort in the Pacific and just focus on Europe. All right, but that was not the case. The Americans, we wanted a decisive victory there. We destroyed 4 Japanese aircraft carriers and 250 planes. All right, and if we go back to this little map here, here's Pearl Harbor, here's Midway. All right, now look at all of this that the United States is going to eventually have to island hop and make their way towards Japan. And that's going to be kind of a reoccurring theme here, this idea of island hopping. All right, and if we're at Midway in 42, we kind of barrel down this way, Guadalcanal, Coral Sea, slowly making their way to the Philippines by 44, and then some of the bigger battles that many of you have heard of, Iwo Jima, 45, and Okinawa, and afterwards in 45. All right? So, something that I think a lot of us take for granted, the kamikaze pilot thing. This wasn't, in Pearl Harbor, they did pray before they left for the missions on Pearl Harbor, not sure if they'd be back, but this is something you really start to see being employed later in the war, in late October 44, and this is done around the Philippines. Really a use of the pilots as a bomb. Today you hear this a lot in some of the kind of warfare that's conducted. They call it suicide missions and stuff like that, or suicide bombers. That's what the Japanese were doing. And you got to understand, the culture of the Pacific front was a lot different in terms of how they conducted warfare there versus in the European theater. And this is one of them. This idea of putting your life on the line, that it's better to die in war than to surrender. All right, some of these ideas that some of you are familiar with, but to really now see it up front here. And that's what you have in this image, is a kamikaze pilot coming towards an American ship. All right, and this is seen in the Philippines. And if you look down here at the bottom, how many were there? 424 kamikaze pilots sank 16 U.S. ships and damaged 80 more. All right, moving on. So that was just down here. This is 44, so this is a couple years difference now from Midway here. And you had a lot of island hopping that had to take place to make the Japanese Empire recede and slowly start to go back and retreat towards their home mainlands. Okay, now we're moving to Iwo Jima. All right, the Allies next turn towards the island of Iwo Jima. This island was critical to the Allies as a base for an attack on Japan, and I'll get onto that in the slide I just skipped quickly there. All right, it was the most heavily defended spot on the earth. That's what's said. All right, Allied, there were 6,000 Marines and 20,000 Japanese forces that suffered heavy casualties. All right, and what was interesting about what the United States started to see in these battles was that the Japanese, very few would surrender. All right, there are 20,000 Japanese forces, only 200 survive and surrender. So this idea of fighting to the death, you're starting to see it on these islands, and American military officials starting to wonder, like, hey, is this what's going to take place when we get on the mainland? If we get on the mainland and very few people are surrendering and they're fighting to the death, this is a war like nothing we've ever seen before. Something else to note, the Japanese government, before we started to get closer to the mainland, they were arming civilian populations with bamboo sticks. It was a policy called Ketsugo. All right, this policy, Ketsugo, was the arming of all civilians to defend themselves against an American attack. All right, but now with Iwo Jima, we have, and this is called a critical Allied base, right? Iwo Jima is a critical base for an attack on Japan. And who's going to be behind this? All right, General Curtis LeMay. He is not on the list right there. He is not on your notes, but he's somebody to note. All right, he's a very important figure in U.S. military history, especially World War II. He is in charge of the firebombing of 66 Japanese cities. All right, one of the more famous raids is the bombing of Tokyo, where over 100,000 Japanese were burned in a single night of bombing. All right, he did some very unconventional things in the war. He is quoted as saying if they lost the war, they would be tried for war crimes. All right, and this is very tough to try and understand. Where are we when we come to 1945 in the war? All right, and Curtis LeMay, he is behind the air raid campaigns. There's a film I have for you to watch called Battle in the Pacific, and it goes over some of the decision making that he had. He had the B-29 bombers fly at a lower altitude so they could hit their targets more directly, but he's putting a lot of his own men in harm's way there. All right, but with Iwo Jima, that's the point. It gives LeMay a base to let these B-29s do these overnight missions, fly to mainland Japan, and start carrying out the bombing raids of 1945. All right? Now, if you look here, here's Iwo Jima, all right? And we're talking about the B-29s being able to fly up here, do these night missions, and come back. And they're hitting 66 cities in these early months of 1945. Hiroshima, as you know, is not bombed, as you see here, until August. All right? So this is before the bomb, the use of the atomic weapon. Moving to Okinawa, April 45. All right? We invade Okinawa. The Japanese unleashed 1,900 kamikaze attacks, sinking 30 ships and killing 5,000 seamen. This is before getting onto the island. Okinawa cost the Americans 7,600 Marines. And the Japanese, they lost 110,000 soldiers. And again, American officials are starting to wonder, is this what we're going to see throughout mainland Japan? We're just off these islands. And there are high casualty rates on both sides and devastating casualty rates on the Japanese side. Okay? Something to consider before we conduct this invasion. All right? Now, that's the question. After Okinawa, General MacArthur, he is wondering, hey, is this going to be like Normandy? Do we have to pull an amphibious invasion of Japan? Some of the numbers. This is inflated. This is inflated, and those in the room that wanted to use the atomic weapon are saying, hey, look, we're going to lose 1.5 million men, Allied deaths. The Soviet Union was going to help us out too. All right? But Truman, he saw only way to avoid an invasion and lose American lives, right, was to use the atomic weapon. All right? Japan, they had a huge army that would defend every inch of the Japanese mainland. So he decided to use this new powerful weapon that scientists were working on in this project called the Manhattan Project. All right? And you're going to do a reading of the primary sources. You're going to watch the film, and you're going to have to make your own decision. Was the U.S. justified in using this? Like I said, I still struggle with this one. All right? We have not had a use of a weapon like this since this war. All right? Now, Truman does warn Japan in late July of 45 that if they do not immediately surrender, it would face prompt and utter destruction. There was cables about this. They dropped leaflets on towns. Was it enough time? Do you still carry this out? Just because you drop a leaflet, does that make it okay? Remember, if you look at the war in Germany, civilians were brought into this conflict. On August 6th, Hiroshima was bombed. August 9th, Nagasaki was bombed. All right. Images from the blast. Several days later, Japan surrenders after the second atomic bomb was dropped. MacArthur is known for saying, today the guns are silent, the skies no longer rain death. The entire world is quietly at peace. Now, some of you are wondering, all right, well, how can I find out maybe more about this? And I hope some of you are interested. I've got a list here, or at least a couple images of some powerful films that you could go over. First one, Grave of the Fireflies. Japanese anime film. Won all kinds of awards. Powerful film, giving you a Japanese perspective. And I'm glad we've got these two films here. All right, there's this one, a little bit older than Letters from Iwo Jima. Letters from Iwo Jima, again, another film on the Japanese perspective, looking at what took place there in Japan. Another film that I've mentioned before, and it's on my list, if you look at the list, The Fog of War, won Best Documentary Film in the early 2000s. Looks at Robert McNamara, who was one of the architects with LeMay behind this, and Robert McNamara becomes Secretary of Defense during the Vietnam War. Heavily involved in American wars. All right, another one I've mentioned before, Band of Brothers. If you're interested in Normandy and looking at the Battle of the Bulge, fantastic series by HBO, and HBO's follow-up, The Pacific. All right, please stay with us in the deadlines and things like that. I hope this was informative, and I hope you know what you got to do for the upcoming days. Take care, be in touch, be good to yourselves, keep it safe, sane, and legal.